Hello and welcome to the gallery at Lakeland Community College. My name is Mary Urbis. I'm the gallery director here and I'm also the curator for this exhibition, which is called From Women, Roman numeral 14. Like I said, this is the 14th incarnation of this exhibition. I started this in 2009 because I just felt that women have been underrepresented for so long, and being a woman curator, I was given the opportunity in the venue to kind of explore those possibilities. So I try and I invite artists from mostly Northeast Ohio, North Central Ohio, but then this year I have artists from Indiana, Georgia, Michigan, Texas, and Oregon. So like I said, and I try and bring in maybe 10, 15 artists that are new each year. And sometimes, yes, I do show some of the same artists, but some of these artists are undershown. They either don't have a studio you can visit or they don't have a gallery that they represent. So I'm going to be giving a curator's talk. I'm going to talk about each of the pieces, give you a little background on the artist, on the technique. Like I said, this is the gallery at Lakeland Community College. We're located on Route 306 in Kirtland, Ohio. This show is a virtual exhibition this year. So again, welcome to the gallery and I hope you enjoy the tour. To start the show, this is a piece by Jody Walsh. Jody is a new artist to our collection. She's from Texas. This is actually an Asian clay technique of folding the clay and then she incisors the pieces, and these are called seed pods. So this is like a mini installation. Okay, this next grouping of work is done by Susan Kraus. These are mixed media on paper and mixed media cold wax medium. These 4 pieces that are flanking the large ones are part of a series that are called Threshold, and so they're noted individually, but they work as a grouping. And as I walk through the show and I show you the installation, I want you to be aware of there's reasons why certain pieces are next to each other. Like we just showed you Jody's pieces with the black and white, and the verticals are repeated somewhat in the composition of Susan's work. I create the visual walkthrough of the show. I design it like a storyline, and every piece interacts with each other. And what happens when I bring the work into the gallery, I let it sit, and the work has a conversation with each other, and then it kind of tells me how to put it together. So it usually takes me about 3 or 4 hours to design the installation, but I'd like to think that it becomes a compelling storyline. And the cut line for the women's shows are women as storytellers. So this next piece is done by Mindy Towsley. She's new to this collection. Mindy is the director of the Artist Archives, which is located near University Circle, near the museums. This is called Yellow Fun, and it's an acrylic monoprint collage. And Mindy also, she used to run Dead Horse Gallery in Lakeland years ago, and so she does all of her framing. So for me, it's not only is it about the artwork, it's also how the artwork is presented. And many of these works are available for sale. If there's something that you're interested in, you could either look at the timestamp of the video and contact me, and I can tell you which piece it is, or you can zoom in on the label at some point, but I'd be happy to help you if you're interested in purchasing artwork from the show. And like I said, the labels do say if the piece is for sale or if it's not for sale. Okay, these are 2 more pieces by Mindy Towsley. The one on the left is called Still Life with Cactus, and the one on the right is called Building Blocks. The Still Life with Cactus is a collage, and the other piece is a monoprint with a collage. Okay, these are some smaller pieces by Mindy Towsley. These are mixed media on paper. The vertical piece is called Downed Line, and then from top to bottom is Spammer, Conference Call, and Internal Schematic. Again, these are mixed media on paper. And then the piece next to it, which is, it's a mixed media on panel, and it's called Trouble Report. And I just kind of liked it because of the The composition, I like the presentation, that it's on board, that the edges are painted black. And being a textile designer, I told Mindy, man, I would love to see fabric like this. She would be a great textile designer. So who knows, maybe I can get her to, challenge her to make some fabric at some point. Okay, this next wall is a grouping of Kathy Scarrett. These are mixed media on canvas. And she has a special technique where she puts a medium into the paint itself, and so that's why she's able to make it so thick and slather it on. It's got a beautiful, yummy texture, and you can see the different layers of the glazings of the color and how the color pools where there's raised areas. So it's almost like a little bit of a bas-relief piece. And then the piece next to it is a 4-panel piece, which is called, obviously, the 4 elements: air, earth, fire, and water. And there are 99 individual pieces that we put together. And what was kind of fun for us, my installation assistant, Steve Bowen, was not given a direction on how to put this piece together. We were just told that there's one piece that's missing and we could put it together any way that we wanted. So this is one of the few times that my installation designer can do something on his own. I mean, my installation helper. I design the installation and he hangs them up. And then, of course, it was the whole thing of how are we going to put up 100 little pieces. So we're using these tape tabs instead of putting 100 nails for each piece, because that'd be like 400 nails, and that's would be a lot of post work. Okay, so then the last piece of this grouping is another piece by Kathy Scarrett, and it's called Ovum. And again, this is mixed media on canvas. This is a ceramic installation by Teresa Yondo. Actually, Teresa is a Lakeland graduate. She has a studio on 306, and she calls this installation Evolving Earthly Objects. And these are pieces that were fired in a wood kiln, a gas kiln, an electric kiln. There's porcelain and stoneware clay bodies. And what's nice about this installation is the shapes are organic, but how she installs it is organic, because she was in a show that I curated earlier last summer at the Valley Arts Center, where she first started this idea, and the pieces, there weren't as many, they were farther apart. And what I like about this one, it's more dense. It does look like a lily pond, and with all the different pieces, and the lotus pods and the lily pads and the orbs and all the different pieces parts, and the mushroom, they almost look like mushroom shapes coming out of them. So it's been fun for her as a challenge, because every place she puts this, it looks a little different, which kind of then adds a little bit more energy to the piece, because you'll never see it the same twice. Okay, as we continue on our tour, this next piece is a piece by Annie Peters. It's called The Crone of Wisdom. It's wood and stone. And then the piece next to it is Laura Lee Scazenta, Free Falling, and it's acrylic, ink, and plaster on wood. And again, if you notice, there's similarities in the imagery, the fact that there's the driftwood, and then the sculpture in the front is also Annie Peters' piece, and it's called The Fledgling Has Flown. So obviously it's about the empty nest. And the other thing I want to kind of point out, what's kind of nice, and you'll see it more as we walk through, these shadows that we sometimes get just because of the way the lights hit it and they're far away are just kind of are bonus for me. It's like magic. So it's kind of fun to see the cast shadows on the wall. Okay, the next two pieces are also by Lorelei Scazenta. The first one is called Ritual, and the one next is Melt With You. Again, these are acrylic, ink, and plaster on wood. Okay, this next piece is done by Carrie Gortz. It is acrylic on enameled watercolor paper. It's entitled Three Sisters, Squash, Corn, and Beans. Carrie has a studio in the West 78th Street complex, and they have their event the third Friday of the month, and she's participating in the directory that I talked about earlier that's showing all the venues created by women. And Carrie is influenced by Native American folklore. Her work is very illustrative, and that's why the title Three Sisters, Squash, Corn, and Beans. Okay, these next three pieces, you guys might recognize the work of Jenny Mendez. She's an artist that lives in Chesterland. Her work is very stylized. It's very what I call illustrative. It tells a story, and I guess every piece of artwork tells a story, but I think there's a little bit more inherent meaning to these. You look at these imagery and you wonder what it is that they're depicting, and so like the round platter in the back is called Nest. The piece in the foreground is called Dante and Beatrice from, I think it's the Iliad and the Odyssey. I'm not sure. It's one of those iconic, or Dante's Inferno. Duh, Dante. Sorry. And then the next piece is called Merging, and like I said, she does a lot of illustrative, painterly style work on her ceramics, and that's what she's known for. And it's a segue into these next three pieces that are done by Jenny Mendez. This is what she's been working on in the past year due to COVID, is a lot of these artists aren't going to art shows, they're not sending their work out, so they've been staying in their studios creating work. And she contacted me and she said, I would really like to show these paintings. And I said, good, great, but you got to give me some of your ceramics too. So she was very happy and gracious to accommodate my request. So these are watercolor and gouache on paper. The first piece is called Garden of Eden. The second is Eyes of Imagination. And then the third piece is Winter Solstice. And again, as you see, a lot of these pieces are for sale, and if you're interested, just contact me. My number here at Lakeland is 440-525-7029. You can also reach me through the website. I'd be happy to help you, and I'd be happy to help you make a purchase, which would support the artist. Okay, this next piece is kind of an interesting piece. It's done by Lisa Rushman. It's called Lilith Escape from Eden, and it's all in stained glass mosaic, mixed media assemblage. And so Lisa is known for her stained glass mosaic. She has a studio over in Stella's Gallery, which just relocated within the last year in downtown Willoughby. And it's kind of cool because you've got the figure with the wings, and then you've got, and so I think the story goes is that Lilith was the first wife of Adam. And I guess, and this is paraphrasing, it didn't work out, and she was banished, and then we all know the story of Adam and Eve. But when you look inside, and we'll get some close-up shots of this, you've got the snake inside, you've got the nest with the eggs, and she kind of makes it like a little diorama. And I don't know about you guys, when I was a little kid, I used to love do the little dioramas. So it's just kind of, it's one shape on the outside, but then you go through the portal literally into another world. And then she created these owl feet, which were kind of cool, out of feathers and different materials. So she uses a lot of mixed media techniques when she creates these sculptures. Okay, this next trio of pieces is done by Deborah Silver. These are hand-woven textiles where she incorporates wool, cotton, rayon, and silk. The thing about her work is sometimes when you look at it, it looks like one thing, but then if you focus in, each one of them incorporates a face, and you don't always see it right away. So this first one is called Warri Hillary, and it incorporates an ancient Warri vessel. And again, the face is kind of over to the left-hand side, and it's a three-quarter view. And when I first saw it, it's like, oh, this is beautiful. I saw the patterns, and all of a sudden my eyes relaxed, and I focused on the face. And the same thing with this next one, which is called Cryptic Chronicle. And this incorporates a Warri tapestry imagery. Deborah's work is very highly influenced by the Warri culture, so she does a lot of references with the color combinations, the color palettes, the design, the patterns themselves. Some of them are very traditional patterns, and then she makes them into very graphic pieces, and then she presents them in a very contemporary way where she stretches them over a stretcher bar so you don't have to worry about how to hang them. This third piece of Deborah's is called Spoken, and again, this is hand woven, and it incorporates, boy, I Kifwebi mask, which is from the Congo. So like I said, she's very much influenced by indigenous cultures, and she's also trying to keep some of the lost arts alive by doing this tapestry, kind of weaving with the illustrative style to it. Okay, these next two pieces are done by Sandy Schellenberger, who's from Conneaut. And what Sandy is known for her hand-printed, hand-created fabrics. These look like they might have been like bleach dyed, where they started with a darker color and tie-dyed or folded and dyed and then put into a bleach bath to etch out the color. Then this is called Shifting Sands, Sapphire Skies with Midnight Moon. And the second piece is part of the same series, and this one's called Shifting Sands, Sapphire Skies with Nautilus. As obviously you can see the Nautilus design on the bottom left. And again, one of the reasons I put this work with Deb's work is because batik is, was first done as an indigenous technique in Thailand, in Asia, in Africa, and I just felt that the imagery and the color palette really worked well together. And then you'll see that the piece next to it, the ceramic piece, which is done by Jody Walsh, who I introduced you to before from Texas, and this piece is called Off the Wall Black and Tan, and she uses that, this Asian technique of folded clay, and she incises textures into them, and then these are waxed cords. And the great thing about Jody, I'm going to give her a shout out, the way she packs her boxes, and everything was marked in all these directions, step by step. She was a dream to work with, and it's just an interesting, compelling piece. And again, at the very bottom of the piece, you can see some nice little shadows setting up. Okay, here is a diptych, a 2-panel piece by Paula Isidoric. She has a studio in the Midtown corridor, and this is called Pinup Girl Diptych. Again, it's showing the women with the punching bag, and she's got the little halo, but the devil horns, and then the piece next to it's kind of like the domestic goddess, where she's got the high heels, but she's pushing a vacuum cleaner while she's holding a martini. I mean, isn't that how everyone cleans their house these days? I don't know about you, but anyhow, so it's interesting how the graphic effect, the way she does the colors and the patterning in the back, and I just thought this was a fun piece, and I'm glad that I have the space to be able to put a piece like this because it does command a presence on the wall. And this is done with acrylic and ink and gold leaf on panel on wood. Okay, these next two pieces are done by Melissa Harris. A lot of you are familiar with Melissa's watercolor landscapes that are very gestural, very graphic, and she's just now started to do more figurative work. So this piece these are both acrylic on canvas. The piece on the left is called At Rest, and the piece on the right is called Crimson Waltz. And I'm embarrassed to say I don't know the ballerina who she is embodying in this photograph, but I believe that she dances with a company from Harlem or somewhere in New York City. But what I really like is you've got these beautiful pensive looks on their faces, and yet the background is very free, and the skirts, a ballerina tutu is usually tall and fluffy, but she doesn't sit there and paint every single piece. So I just kind of like how your eye is able to go around the painting and you focus on the face or the neck or whatever, but then you've got this kind of abstract background that it's in contrast to. Okay, this is a piece by Gwen Waite. She's an artist from Akron who I do show on a regular basis. This is found art assemblage called Unhinged. And what I love about Gwen's work is just the pieces parts that she assembles, and I can't even imagine what her studio must look like. When you're an artist, and let's say you're a painter, you've got a palette with your red, green, blues and all that, but artists like Gwen who do assemblage work, assemblage, she might have boxes and boxes of hinges, boxes and boxes of sprockets, wooden pieces, things that she rescues from other pieces parts. So, and it's become a very popular art form, and part of it was just because some artists in the beginning could not afford to purchase paints and canvases, so to recycle, repurpose the work as the pieces parts is also important to some of these artists. It's also about elevating a normal object into high art. I mean, because that's a megaphone and a bunch of rusty hinges on what looks like a little child's step stool, but she puts the pieces together into these very compelling compositions. Okay, these next 4 pieces are done by Beth Nash. She is pretty much an annual exhibitor in this woman's show. I met Beth years ago when she used to do fiber, when I used to do the art fair circuits, and we have mutual friends, and we've stayed friends over the years. She does teach college level courses, and what she's been recently doing is, you know, you've known her for her mixed media paintings, but now because of COVID and being quarantined, she's really gotten into working with an iPad Pro. So these are actually digital prints that are done on an iPad Pro that are done in a Procreate software, which is the program. She's a colorist, she has a mastery of the figure, and this is a fun collection of the different figures and the different colors. So the first one is called Au Francois, the second is Topaz, the third is Green, and then the fourth piece is called Plaid Dress. Still having a hard time figuring out where the plaid dress part is, but that's okay. Sometimes a title will help direct you. Sometimes it'll maybe stop you to contemplate of what is the artist trying to say, and sometimes it might be an obscure meaning. But again, it's a nice cohesive collection of work from Beth. We have 3 portraits by Tricia Common. She's one of the premier portrait painters in Northeast Ohio. She has a studio in the Murray Hill School Galleries down in Little Italy. She also runs Common Art Shops, so whenever you go to an amusement park and you see a young artist there who's doing caricatures or small portraits, that's the company that she started, and she has outlets all over the country, and she's helped a lot of artists grow their careers, because if you sit there every day and you draw people, you're going to get better, because people always say to me, oh, I can only draw stick figures, and I say, well, do you think Picasso came out of his mother with a paintbrush or a pen in his hand? It's no, you have to practice. It's like music. You get better by practicing, but with art you get better by drawing and doing. So she and her husband Richard have been great caretakers and great inspiration for generations of artists. So these pieces are oil on canvas. The first one is called Pretty in Pink. The next one is Dark Joe. And the third is Lady in Red. And the reason, and she was surprised I picked this one, but there's something about the opulence of the fabric and the neck piece and the highlights of the red and the fur against the contrast of the green velvet chair. So like I said, it's 3 different approaches to portrait painting. Okay, here's another piece by Paula Isidore. This one is called And Friend. And again, you've got the woman with the punching bag and the bikini and the go-go boots, but it's very pop culture, op art looking, and just the contrast of how she treated the flesh tones and the designs versus the background and the organic shapes that kind of ebb and flow. Okay, this next piece is a piece by Marilyn Zalay. Marilyn used to teach down at Cleveland State. She was a mentor to so many different students, and she by far has such a grasp of the human anatomy and how she's able to capture the emotion in the figures. And then, like I said, she knows her anatomy. Look at those fingers. Look at those. You just know she's got a grasp of the bone structure, of the skeletal structure. And this piece is called Tangible Connections, and this is charcoal and Conte on paper. Marilyn is probably the only artist in this collection who is not a living artist. For the most part, I do try and show artists that are living to support them, but I met her a few years ago and she passed away, and she was so prolific and has so much work that I basically told her sister, Diane, that I could show 2 pieces of hers for eternity, and I probably wouldn't get through everything. So I do like to show people what it is that her work is about. And then the piece in the center is done by Jody Walsh, and this is an installation called Cube Installation. And again, and what's nice about this, the way she sent it to us, she sent us a template. There are holes in it so that we could put the different screws, the different hooks for the different pieces. Again, this is folded clay, and Jody does a lot of corporate installations. And again, what's nice about this installation is look at all those lovely cast shadows because of the different lights, and they're so far away you're getting multiple shadows and multiple images, so it kind of adds to the whole installation of the piece itself. And again, I put this obviously with this piece because of the different textures and because of the black and white theme to it, and I didn't want it to get lost in the shuffle of the show. Okay, and then the second piece is called The Ties That Bind. And again, you can see that it has 2 of the models from the original piece we just showed you a minute ago. As you see the work that she presents that I pick year to year, you'll notice that there's certain models that were her muse that she really enjoyed drawing. And what's nice about this, it's the mother and the child. It's showing the different generations. But again, look at how intense the looks, the expressions, and how she captures the hands and the eyes. And she is pretty well known for how she captures her hands. Like I said, she definitely has a grasp of anatomy. Okay, this is another piece by Gwen Waite called Washing Hands, or called Relax and Wash Your Hands. And obviously it's an homage to the fact that it's a relaxed bedpan. And the whole point about this is it's kind of a way to highlight the fact that we've been so desensitized with everything that's been going on, and sometimes we need to do something that we're used to doing, something like a familiar ritual that kind of puts us back into the normal thing, flow of things. A simple task keeps you on track. So that's the whole thing of washing your hands. And the other thing, as we kind of do a close-up, which was very interesting, is that what these soaps are they're like soap ends, soap stubs. And what Gwen did is she took obituaries of people that had passed away from COVID. So that is what is on both sides. There's a different obituary on each side. And on a side note, she said she's been collecting, stubs from her friends and her family. And the other day her husband said, "Hey, what happened to the bar of soap that I was using yesterday?" And she goes, I sequestered it and it's, she's using it in another piece. So this is a way of getting other people involved in a piece, but I think it's a very powerful piece because, we're talking about washing our hands and trying to get over what's been going on in this country, and how interesting and compelling that she would put the people on the soap itself. For those of you who have been ardent fan of the exhibition, you'll recognize the work of Susan Shai from Worcester, Ohio. She's very politically oriented, and so this piece is called Jomala, Eight of Pyrex cups in the kitchen tarot. It's obviously a homage to our new president and vice president, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. You'll see the imagery of very strong women. Ida B. Wells, you've got the Statue of Liberty with the third eye in her forehead and then the fourth eye. You've got Susan Rice, who's the Director of Domestic Policy. There's Hillary Clinton, Shirley Chisholm, Eleanor Roosevelt. You've got Janet Yellen, who's Secretary of the Treasury, Marcia Fudge, Deb Haaland, Kamala Harris, obviously on the left-hand side. And what Susan's work is all about, the commentary. She talks about what was happening when she was writing this piece, and she talks about the insurrection that happened in January, and then she also starts talking on the border piece, because that's the last part she did. She talked about the impeachment hearing. So her work is very politically charged, but in this piece she was trying to, again, show homage to the women. You see the healthcare worker giving the inoculation. You've got, you know, phrases like freedom triumphant in peace, joy to the world, you know. Biden is the people's president. So she tries to do pieces that are very enlightening, but kind of have a social message. It's all about, you know, treating women equally. Okay, this next piece is a piece by Annie Peters, and I'm going to read a little bit of her statement. Normally, I try not to be that, you know, academic here, but I feel that this is important information. The piece is called Bride Burning, a form of dowry death, is the death of a young woman or girl, sometimes as young as 12 years old, in South Asian countries, who is murdered or driven to suicide by her husband. This illegal and difficult to prosecute practice comes from the husband and or his relatives continually attempting to extract more dowry from the bride or her family. In addition to bride burning, acid throwing and Eve teasing are also forms of dowry death. Because the dowry typically depends on class or socioeconomic status, girls and women are often subjected to cruel and unreasonable dowry pressures. And then it's also on a hand-woven rug. And we lifted it on a platform so that it would have a very quiet but powerful, ominous presence. Okay, these are two additional pieces by Gwen Waite. I want to point out to you that Gwen Waite is half Asian descent, and she has experienced racism and stereotypical treatment. And for a while, it was ramped up by our former president and the whole thing with the COVID coming from China. So unfortunately, you know, people of the Asian culture and descent have been victims of a lot of violence recently and a lot of just negative behavior, negative thoughts. So this piece on the left is called In Bed, and it talks about how sexualized the Asian population has been, how they show women, how they've been hypersexualized. The whole stereotype of being mystical, a mysterious, demure, submissive woman. You think about the geishas and what they did and how quiet they were. They were never allowed to speak. So there's fortune cookies that are in the background in between those pieces, and there's been something has been come out recently where they're over sexualizing this, and what they'll do is people will read a fortune cookie and they'll say in bed. So it'll be like, oh, your fortune cookie would be like, oh, your future is bright and your path is clear in bed. And so that's why she created this way. And again, she uses the recycled shoe horns and the ice picks, and then she painted them and put the in bed part on them. And now the next piece is also a comment on how she's been treated over the years. It's entitled, I Will Love You for an Extended Period of Time. And it's a phrase that's often used in the movies. And again, it's about typically objectifying an Asian woman as a hooker or a prostitute, and you'll hear them say, "You love me long time." So this is a play on words where instead of saying, "You love me long time," I will love you for an extended period of time. And so again, she's got the ice pick, she's got the sprockets, she's got the Asian sculptures, she's got the gold chains. But these two pieces specifically, look at those yummy shadows. Those, again, that's like the gift from the gallery gods, that the way that the piece hung out and all the shadows just, I think, really makes an impact on the piece. Okay, this is our poster girl, Judy Takis. She's a Cleveland Institute of Art graduate. This is called Love Athena Triptych. It's oil on canvas. This is a new series for her. You may recognize Judy's work. She had done a series called Chicks with Balls, and so now she's doing the Goddess Project, where she's dealing with stories about Greek mythology. And these stories are a treasure trove that kind of talk about the injustices that parallel what's going on in our world today. The whole story about the goddess Athena was that it was about petty jealousness, and she had a volatile temper which wreaked havoc in lives of blameless mortal women. And so, again, Judy is trying to portray these women, and all these women that you're seeing here have been victims of horrendous events, surgeries, divorces, car accidents, devastating loss. So she tries to depict these women as warriors. And she talks about how women in power see other women as enemies. That's why you hear about this thing called the queen bee syndrome, where the queen bee, where there's only room for one woman at the top. And so she's talking about how she's trying to show women, because the phenomena where you're seeing, some women are apprehensive about aspiring to positions of power and decision making, because it becomes so competitive, and sometimes another woman will see another woman as an enemy, And so what she did with this is that she cast herself as Athena, and where she's reflecting, her reflecting shield is reflecting good and not evil. She's wielding a paintbrush, not vengeance for her sisters. And the other thing I wanted you to point out is she's kind of using this, boy, and I hope I'm getting my art history correct as far as the timing, the Renaissance technique, where you'll see the reflection of her working in her studio in the reflection of the shield itself. And the thing that's a little bit interesting about this piece is that she reworked it. She reworked the left figure of the central painting, and that's not something she normally does, but she just felt that she wasn't capturing the model's name was Pam, and she said that, she's known her, the twinkle in her eye, the wise kindness of mom knows best, but she just felt that she needed to capture her a different way. And she said that her expression eluded her, but she realized that her expression had changed. And Judy goes to say that maybe her personal view of the world had changed also. So again, it's unusual sometimes to have do a painting and then paint something differently, because you've created the composition, you've painted it, and suddenly you're going to be changing it, because the original photo, she was kind of looking at you 3/4 view, and now you're seeing it more of a profile view. And again, Judy is known for her grasp of the anatomy and the hands and the veins and all that. And it's about depicting the reality of it. It's not about the cosmetic, superficial, fluff of sometimes the whole thing about what is beauty, and so she's showing you the beauty in someone who's suffering from cancer and has no hair. And like I said, all these women have their own little stories. Okay, this is Evie Zimmer. This is a oil on canvas called Rastafloria. This is pretty indicative of Evie's work, where she does bookmark reflective images of flowers and fauna, and it's just such a beautiful color palette. And I chose this piece because knowing in March in Northeast Ohio and Cleveland, most of the colors you're going to see this time of year are white and gray and brown, and then lots of road salt all over your car. So it just makes me happy to see these beautiful colors, and it makes me realize that my eyes still do work. They can register full spectrum of color. Okay, these next 4 paintings were created by Sarah Curry. This is a new series for her, which are kind of based on selfie photos. I saw this work when Sarah had a show at Hedge Gallery at West 78th Street, and I was just quite taken by them. These are gouache and flocking on wood panel. I just love that you've got that dark, intense black, you've got the little bit of the texture of the patterning of the flowers, and then you've got these beautiful portraits and how she's able to capture the skin tones on these women. And so this first one is called Natalia's Daisies, and obviously you see the daisy technique in the back. And I think I'm drawn to these because I'm a classically trained textile designer, so to see these textile patterns in the background I find very appealing. And this next piece is called Naomi, or Naomi. And this next one, Tori, there's something about that deep, intense black, and when I finally looked at it, that part is felted, but it's like there's this new black color out there that, I don't know, this is like such, I don't know if dead is the right way to say it, but it seems like it's infinity. You're looking, especially when you look at her mask area, you feel like you're looking in a black hole. And it just kind of sucks you in, and it's the contrast of that with the phone and then the look on their faces. And the 4th piece of this grouping is called Nola's Astilbe. And again, the Astilbe is the flower in the background, but again, it's just the way she, does the perspective and captures the tone of in the expression of the women. And again, these are a diverse group of women and skin coloring and a diverse background. Okay, these next 2 pieces are from Ohio artist recently relocated to Georgia. Her name is Kathy Rogers. These are both oil on canvas. This is called Red, Gold, and Green. And the next piece is Hope, Knowledge, and Time. It's a little traditional, but I tried to place the traditional next to the pop culture of the selfies, and then we're going to be going into a little bit more, next piece will be a little bit more traditional painting. This next piece is Stanka Kordic. Stanka is a Cleveland Institute of Art graduate. This is entitled Open Window, Oil on Panel. Stanka is one of the premier portrait painters in Northeast Ohio. She used to be the artist in residence at Beaumont School for Girls in Cleveland Heights, Shaker Heights, and she just recently retired from there. So now she's relocated her studio to Bedford, which is where she lives, and now she's enjoying being able to paint every day, and she misses her students, but she's doing some awesome work. And I first met her when we used to work together at Sylvia Ullman's, we're talking decades ago. And again, to reinforce the whole idea of the visual storyline, if you see Stanka's piece and you've got that kind of the open window yellow, and it kind of segues into the next grouping of work by Leslie Discount-Arian. Leslie is also a Cleveland Institute of Art graduate. And these are mixed media on paper. This first piece is called Mending. And they're figurative based without being absolutely literal. And again, it's kind of abstract, loose, in contrast to the very detailed, very specific, intricately drawn portraits and figures of some of the other pieces in the show. This middle piece is called Sacred Feminine, and then the third piece is called Wild Feminine. And again, it's just having the contrast of the colors of the composition, but then the color, even though these are very expressionistic and kind of abstract, the colors kind of feed into the next 3 pieces we're going to show you of Jamie Zentz. Here are 3 pieces by Jamie Zentz. Jamie is also a Cleveland Institute of Art graduate. These are pencil oil on birch. And what Jamie does, she's one of the first artists that I became aware of who used the wood grain of the birch, and she picks out the pieces, and she feels that the wood grain tells her what she needs, what she should be working on, or where the composition is, or where the figure should be placed in the middle of the piece. And then what she does is she'll go in and with her pencil and she will draw into the background, so they become very surreal, very dreamlike, very intricate, where you kind of look in and be like, oh my God, what's going on back there? So there's many levels of what she's doing. There's many of us who wish also that she would become a clothing designer, because some of us would love to see dresses like this. Some of these, and okay, you can tell I've been watching Say Yes to the Dress. I can tell you that's a fit and flare mermaid dress on the left. But like I said, she's another person who knows how to capture the emotion in the face, the eyes, how she does the skeletal structures. And then the middle piece is called Luna. And again, she's got all these beautiful things going on where the background becomes the foreground in her clothing, and she's got the halo around her, but just the way she does the face and the nose and the indent under the nose above the lip, it's just, her work is exquisite. And you can tell she's one of my favorites. I've really enjoyed her work. And for a few years, she was gracious and generous enough to be my gallery assistant and helped me install my shows. And so the third piece is called Veiled by a Thread. It's one of her small little ones, because there's a lot of people who want to collect her work but maybe can't afford to spend the money for a larger piece. So every now and then she'll do a smaller piece so that people can add it into their collection. And then the last piece on this wall is done by Anya Khan. Anya is from Oregon. Anya's an artist that I met in social media on Facebook years ago, so she's been in and out of my shows over the years, so I'm very glad to have her back in the show this year. This is called Garden of Celine, and this is mixed media on birch panel. So she's another artist in the show that likes to paint on the wood, because there's also the surface of the wood, the way it takes the paint, and then sometimes the artist will actually integrate the actual wood grain into the composition of the piece. Okay, this piece is created by Maggie Brown. She lives in Chagrin Falls, Ohio. She is new to this collection. And what Maggie does is she uses cut paper in her collage, and I just think that she does a really nice job of it. And then she frames it with the distressed lathe, boards to kind of give it a rustic look. So this piece is called Wild Horse, but again, she uses decorative paper. She uses, she'll cut up foam books, she'll shred different things, whatever she needs for the color, for the texture to create the composition. Okay, these next three pieces were created by Laurel Herbold. Laurel has a studio in the West 78th Street complex. These are acrylic on canvas. Some of them are on paper, and these pieces that I select are very organic pieces, very thinking about growth and goddess and future, and the future looks bright. Those kind of inspirations that are integrated into the The first piece is called Last Breath. The middle one is called Green Eyed, and I contrasted them and I flanked them by those two organic pieces. Even though the center is kind of very geometric, it looks like a little bit of Hunter Twasser, or it looks like a cubist version of Starry Night. But again, she's bringing in the organic and the very hard-edged pieces in contrast. So the middle piece is called Green Eyed. And then the third piece is called Mother. And so you've got the trees and they're embracing, and the root system and the colors, and I enjoy the fact that they're framed in a wood frame, which kind of just ties the whole presentation together. Okay, these three photographs were created by Becky Grasser. Becky is faculty here at Lakeland Community College. She teaches IT. She does a lot of extensive traveling, so she's able to photograph these exotic locations. And so for this collection, she was doing interiors of churches, and these are tricolor gum bichromate prints on cyanotype. So she's kind of using some very age-old, time-honored techniques that she's incorporating into her compositions. So the first piece is Cathedral of the Holy Cross in St. Eulalia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And then in contrast to that, with interior, you've got the architectural details of this next piece, which is called Berliner Dom. And then the third piece, I can't read that title, is, I hope I pronounced this right, boy, I never took French, Basilique Notre Dame in Montreal. And again, I like the fact that she's using a little bit of the weathered wood, so it's not too slick of a presentation. Because those of you who know me, it's besides the artwork, it's also how you present it, how you frame it, that you put enough of a mat around it, and that the frame does not detract from the image itself, and it kind of blends into it. It's like a color saturation that she creates. Okay, these next pieces are created by Lisa Kenyon. Lisa has a studio foundry on the near west side, and these are cast bronze pieces, and I like her work because it's very organic, but yet she's using a material, that's very, that once she makes the original and casts it, then it becomes very impervious, and so she's using bronze to depict natural elements. The first piece is called Along the River, and you've got an image of the snake, you've got an image of the bird. Looks like it could be a turtle on top, and it has a beautiful green patina on it. The next to it, you've got a piece called Sentience, and actually Sentience is written out across the bottom, and you've got this globe image with the snake and then the root system. So we're talking about sentient beings and how some of them do think and have emotions. And just because they don't speak English doesn't mean that they don't feel, that they don't interact with each other. And then in the middle, we have another piece of Laurel Herbold again called Man-Eaters. And again, the reason I put this in there is because it's the stylization of the pieces. It's the even though the man-eater is like a jellyfish kind of thing, I was almost sensing these as pods or wings, and it segues into the next piece next to it of Lisa Kenyon's that's called Swamp Music, which has the butterfly, the dragonfly, the picture of the world of the globe. And then her fourth piece is a sculptural piece with the jaguar and the fauna. This one is entitled Habitat, and it's on a granite base. Okay, this is a piece by Betty Skufca. Again, she's someone that I show in my woman show every year. She's 92 years young. She's an inspiration. She's my shiro. She paints in her studio every day, and she calls her technique dotalism, where she does the little dots. And most of her pieces are oil on canvas board, and this one is called I Think My GPS Screwed Up. And Betty likes to title her pieces with a little bit of a impish naughtiness. You look at her and she looks like this demure kind of grandmother of a woman. You hear her stories, you would never believe the stuff that she's done in her life. She just looks like a sweet old lady, but does she have stories to tell. Okay, this next piece is another piece by Maggie Brown. This is Snowy Owl Flees the Aspens. It's cut paper collage, and I think this is probably one of my favorite pieces of hers. I've got this affinity to owls, and one of my last trips to Hawaii, during the middle of the day, a huge white owl flew over me, which was very significant because normally they're not even out in the daytime. So I don't know, there's just something about them that I find that resonates with me. They might be one of my spirit animals, I'm not sure. Okay, this next grouping is a new artist to the group. This is Teresa Wooden from Michigan, and these are sgraffito carved stoneware and porcelain, and she's doing these animal totems. So we have a carved jar on the left, which is called Fox's Meadow, And then we have the the totem jars that have the carved surfaces, and then she creates the totems of the animals. So we have a raven, we have a owl, and then we have a prancing fox. And then the piece on the top to the right is a carved jar, and that's called A Home at the Edge of the Woods. And again, what she does is, she covers the piece and then she carves away, so it almost looks like a woodblock print. In some ways, I wish that they could be printed or inked up and rolled on paper to transfer the image. And then the last piece on this wall is another piece by Betty Skufca called Let's Dance. And so you've got the owl and the bird, and she was into a lot of children's stories. I'm sure there's a very specific story, but what the name of it is eluding me right now, what she's talking about. The end wall here on the hallway section of the gallery, the first piece on the left is a piece by Leni Bachman. She's actually an artist from Columbus, and this piece is called Woodland Mouse, and this is acrylic on canvas. And ironically, I was told about her work from another friend of mine, another artist, and I went down to Columbus 2 years ago to meet her, thinking I was meeting Leni Bachman, this wonderful illustrative surrealist artist, and it turns out that she was a friend of my brother's, and I didn't realize it until I got there, and she looked at me, she goes, "Oh, Mary, I'm so glad you came." I was like, I just didn't connect the dots. So this was one of those happy accidents that I had met her years ago, and then here I was drawn to her work again, and it's a very illustrative, very detailed style, which I just find very appealing. And then the piece in the center is another piece by Evie Zimmer. It's another one of her swirly pieces. This is called Undertow, and it's oil on canvas. And then we have the third piece of this collection. It's another piece by Leni Bachman called Whippoorwill. Again, it's acrylic on canvas. Okay, in the display case on the top shelf, we have the work of Kimberly Chapman. Kimberly is another Institute of Art graduate. These are pieces from her Bridled Women series, and these are porcelain and glaze. Kimberly is a non-traditional student. She came back to the art world after she had a successful career in marketing and doing some other things, so now she's doing ceramic sculpture, and I met her a few years ago right before her BFA presentation. So again, these are part of a series she's working on. So the one on the left is called Faint of Heart Helen. The one in the middle is called From Whom the Bell Tolls Tabitha. And then the third piece is Budding Heads Bertha. And she was a little apprehensive to give me these pieces because she's getting ready to show them in another exhibition, but I told her I would be a good caretaker of the work, and that's why they're in the case, so that they can be protected. And then it also gives them a nice place so when people walk through, they see it right away. And then the next shelf, this is another CIA graduate. This is Laura Lee Hudson. She taught here at Lakeland for a brief time. Okay, now I'm going to read a little bit from her artist statement because there's so much information in here. The piece on the left, it's called Commit. It's a seed vault. And it says the sculptural seed vessel began as a response to beehive dissemination and the risk that climate changes are bringing to food security, food crops, which require pollination. In 6 short months since the beginning, the vault, it has become a more vital concern with broader implication. When a society is under stress, its spirituality intensifies, and often physical need drives a shift in things held sacred. Seeds vital to growing a food supply become a lifeline, and their importance elevates exponentially. She talks about it. She implores us to sharpen our awareness of the fragility of this rapidly shifting environment with its visual imagery focusing directly on crops requiring pollination and bees, and in form, it's reflected of the venerated objects and architecture of the Middle Ages. The interior stores 15 vials of seed, and within its lid, directly under the cloisonne flowers, and B is an even smaller compartment for storage. It represents our human past and future as we all grapple with climate change and its various effects on our viability as one of the many at-risk species. It represents the sacred to a culture in which food becomes a focal point, and some people just need to understand that without bees, we're not going to have crops, we're not going to have pollinated fruits and vegetables, and that's what people are worried about, is the food supply as we go forward, especially during this pandemic. This next piece is called The Sorrowful Mysteries COVID Rosary. And Laura Lee writes, I was not raised Catholic, but was raised in a faith that also had ritualistic behaviors, and I understood the benefits of handling objects rhythmically in efforts to self-soothe or keep track of a mantra spoken. I recognize that when we feel threatened, we gravitate to ritualized behavior with even more zeal, and my heart broke for the survivors of COVID, those left behind and bewildered. So I wrapped both of these into the visual imagery of the symbolic end of my rosary. The heart is broken. The victim brutally demonstrates the asphyxia, the lack of oxygen in his body. And I represent those already dead using a pine box to relate to the speed needed to meet the burial needs of so many dead. I intended the face to have reference to a well-known fictional monster, as COVID truly is the monster among us. I wanted the brutal realities to hit the viewer in this grotesque and gruesome way, to reach both their empathy and their personal fears, so that they would not walk away unmoved by what we all collectively are imprisoned with. And then as you get a little detail to this, you'll see that there are little mini coffins underneath the figure, the face of that, and then she's got the coffins on top. And again, it's one of those walk quietly but carry a big stick when you realize what the inspiration was and what she's depicting and what she's honoring with this piece. Okay, here we have the work of Patricia Hecker. She's from Indiana. She's been in my woman show fairly regularly. She works with her husband, John. Her company is called Tattoo Dreams. And these are called Good Karma beads. And what she does is she creates the beads. She has a huge collection of rubber stamps. She makes the shapes, she paints them. Each bead string has a very specific theme to it. So from left to right, it's Frida, Namaste, love, protect, and peace. And there's words, there's phrases, there's inspirational phrases, there's imagery, there's color on all the different edges. And then her husband so nicely made a little display rack so that we could see them. And I met Patricia at the Boston Mills Arts Festival when she used to do different work, and then she started doing this tattoo work, and she's been in my skull shows, and then she's been in my women's show pretty often. And she actually was one of the artists that created one of the awards for the Women of Achievement that the Women's Center here produces. Unfortunately, due to COVID this year, there's not going to be a Women of Achievement Award event in conjunction with our show. We're hoping that we'll be able to do an award ceremony maybe later in the year into the summer. Okay, here's another piece by Lisa Rushman. Like I said before, she has a studio at Stella's Gallery in downtown Willoughby. This is called COVID on My Mind. It's lampwork glass and stained glass mosaic, and what all those little curly, cute little pieces are, she does a lot of lampwork beading where she's got the glass and she has a torch, and sometimes she twists and adds things, but then sometimes you get to a point it doesn't look right, or you only need part of it, and she throws it on the floor. So this was a way to kind of incorporate the cast-offs into a really compelling piece of artwork where it's showing the hair, it's showing On My Mind, and showing how crazy and convoluted and twisted everything has become, but yet it's on top of a very pensive, in repose figure with her eyes closed. So it's kind of like, you know, the quietness of your mind, but you close your eyes and your brain doesn't stop. It's constantly talking to you and giving you a narrative. Okay, we have another piece here by Lainey Bachman, Frog with Tadpoles, which is again another acrylic on canvas. And next four are some more dadaism pieces by Betty Skufka. The first piece is called Love at First Sight, and when I picked these pieces out, she said this was one of her favorite pieces with the frogs looking at each other on lily pads. And what's nice about Betty's work is sometimes she'll find some cool frames and then she'll paint onto the frames so that it becomes a true presentation, a true work of art, that everything is kind of integrated with each other. So then the next piece with this wonderful carved frame is Spirit of the Snake. And I love how she's got the green, foliage in the background, and then she's got the red flowers, which kind of takes, kind of draws you into the center with that forked tongue and that face, those eyes that are looking at you. The next piece is called Out for a Stroll. And this is another example of how she uses, the dot pattern, and how a lot of times if you look at the faces of these animals, she makes them look like they're human eyes. So, here we have this little baby kind of leopard kind of walking around with the foliage and the lily pads, and she does a lot of naturalistic, very illustrative storytelling kind of compositions. And then this next one is just, I don't know, there's just something so compelling about that face. Come on in out of the dark. And okay, I'm not sure if this is a gorilla or a chimpanzee or whatever, but just look at that face and the textures on the background and those eyes. You look at those eyes and that mouth, and it's a sentient being. It's a being that feels, that can show compassion, that understands, and it's just, I don't know, there's just something very calming about this portrait. Okay, here's another two pieces by a very recognizable Cleveland artist. This is Judith Brandon. She's an Institute of Art graduate. And these are mixed media on paper. And the first one is called Draw the Circle on the Day. And she does a lot of things with very atmospheric or weather or the turbulence, and then she'll do drawings in the back and letterings. This next one is called Booze Storm. And I believe that on the top right corner there's a martini glass, but it's one of these, Judy's work is the kind of work where you kind of have to keep looking at it, and it's almost like those hidden figures, the hidden icons in there that you don't always see right away, but then all of a sudden you're thinking, oh, I'm seeing the letter E, and I'm seeing Z, and I'm seeing the different, and sometimes she just uses the letters as a graphic representation, as a graphic element. And we're finishing the collection, today's tour, with 3 more pieces by Chagrin Falls artist Maggie Brown. Again, these are cut paper collage. The first one is called Foxhound. The second is Appaloosa Mare with her foal, which is so sweet, the way she pictures it and how she, she collects all these newspapers and writings and papers, and how she's using the texture to create a shape and create, a form without sitting there rendering something, very, very specifically. And then the last piece with the dogs, it's called The Huntsman Has Treats. So how do you get the attention of a purrhead or a fur baby? You shake that can of treats, or you hold something up, and then suddenly it's like, okay, Dad, what you got for me? So this concludes the tour of the show. I hope you've enjoyed coming along with me on the journey. I really enjoy sharing the stories of my artists, a little background. I hope that you gained some insight into the artist. I hope that you gained some insight and some appreciation into the work and some of the imagery that they incorporated. We are going to be doing a virtual artist reception on Sunday, March 21st at 3 p.m. If you could go to the Lakeland webpage for the gallery, which is lakelandcc.edu/gallery, and we will have the link that you can join us, and I'll be here with some of the artists, and we'll strike up a conversation, and we're just going to see how it goes. I've never led a live video feed event, so it's going to be a maiden voyage for me, but I think it'll be okay. And as you can see, I'm really connected with the artwork, and it's very compelling. So thank you for taking the time to join us, and have a great day.